Now that the Book of Boba Fett is over, it's time to run through all of the Easter eggs, references, and other Star Wars connections scattered throughout the series. Here are 225 that I found. Chapter 1's title, Stranger in a Strange Land, is a reference to a science fiction novel by Robert Heinlein about a human raised by Martians who returns to Earth to transform Terran culture. That is an appropriate title, considering Boba Fett's time with the Tuskens, his reinvention, and his return to notoriety in the galaxy. The episode begins with Boba healing in a Bacta tank. Bacta was first introduced in The Empire Strikes Back, where we see Luke take a dip to heal after his encounter with the Wampa. Boba's pod is smaller and seems more advanced, which lines up with the idea that Bacta technology continues to develop until it can be worn like a suit, as seen in The Last Jedi. In the tank, Boba dreams of his past. First, he sees Kamino, where he and his father Jango lived for a time, while the Republic's clone army was being created. Remember, Boba is also a clone of his father, so Kamino is his homeworld. It's been a good year for Kamino between this and its appearances in The Bad Batch. Boba also dreams of Geonosis, and we see a recreation of the scene in Attack of the Clones where he mourns his father's death. We see it from a couple different angles, including a glimpse at his young reflection in the helmet of his father. Daniel Logan is listed in the credits as playing young Boba Fett, reprising his role from nearly 20 years ago. The wide shots were archival footage from 2002, but the close-up of the helmet was shot new with a double for the series. We then flash to Boba's escape from the Sarlacc pit. The visuals reminded me of a couple pieces of unofficial Star Wars content. I don't really think this was on purpose, more like inevitable considering the subject matter, but the first is this fan art from Dan Lou Viziart, which I've always liked, and the second is the Patton Oswalt filibuster from Parks and Recreation, where his character describes the Mandalorian gauntlet of Boba Fett pulling the feared bounty hunter from the maw of the sand beast. It's not exactly the same, but the similarities did make me laugh. Shortly after, Jawas arrived to relieve Boba Fett of his armor. We know this has to happen because Cobb Vanth will eventually trade several crystals for the armor in their Sandcrawler, as seen in The Mandalorian's Season 2 premiere. We also read about those events in the 2015 book Aftermath by Chuck Wendig. After being robbed, Boba is captured by Tusken Raiders who take him to their camp. Their banthas travel in single file during the journey, just as Obi-Wan Kenobi described in A New Hope. Massives are at the camp and are present throughout the rest of the episode. Those dog-like creatures were first introduced in Attack of the Clones, but have also appeared in The Clone Wars and The Mandalorian. Boba Fett suggests to the Rodian that they escape the Tuskens and make their way to Anchorhead. That Tatooine city was first mentioned in A New Hope. The Tusken Raiders can be seen drinking from the strange pods first seen in The Mandalorian. Cobb Vanth initially declined to share a drink from one in the episode The Marshal. We can see Tuskens using sign language to communicate, a part of their culture also introduced in The Mandalorian's 5th chapter, The Gunslinger. Boba Fett is eventually taken on an expedition with a child out into the desert. They come across a homestead similar to the one Luke Skywalker grew up in, with a small structure next to a pit. The farmers there are robbed of their water, which is of course precious on Tatooine. The theft of water under the guise of taxation was something seen in the Star Wars comics by Jason Aaron. Jabba the Hutt sent henchmen to rob the Lars family, but they were chased off by Obi-Wan. These thugs are part of a swoop or speederbike gang. Swoop gangs were seen on Tatooine in Shadows of the Empire. Boba later fights and kills a large creature buried in the desert sands. It resembles the kinds of stop-motion creatures designed and animated by Ray Harryhausen for films like Jason and the Argonauts, The Mysterious Island, and several other mythology-based films. That's fitting since Star Wars is a mythology, but Harryhausen also inspired several visual effects artists that have worked on Star Wars like Phil Tippett and John Berg. The Acklay fight in Attack of the Clones was partially based on a sequence from The Mysterious Island, for example. Fett's victory over the creature earns him the respect of the Tusken chief, who offers him water upon his return. However, the young Tusken child takes credit for the kill and is celebrated by most of the village. Battling krayt dragons was seen as a rite of passage for adolescent Tuskens back in Star Wars legend stories. It makes sense that the defeat of another large desert creature would also be celebrated. Jumping ahead to the present day of the series, Boba and Fennec receive several visitors to Jabba's palace. I guess it's Boba's palace now, but whatever. Each visitor is introduced by 8D8, Jabba's chief of cyborg operations, who I guess is now the closest thing Boba has to a protocol droid. 8D8 could be seen in Return of the Jedi torturing a Gonk droid. A Trandoshan pays tribute to Boba with a Wookiee pelt. Trandoshans and Wookiees have a long-standing rivalry. Trandoshans often captured Wookiees and would then hunt them for sport, as seen most prominently in the Clone Wars episodes Padawan Lost and Wookiee Hunt. Finnick threatens the majordomo of Mok Shays by suggesting he would have been fed to Jabba's menagerie for his insolence. A menagerie is a collection of wild animals kept in captivity. Legend stories suggested Jabba had more than just the Rancor kept down in his dungeons. We are told that Mok Shays is the mayor of Mos Espa and its surrounding plateaus. We later see Mos Espa, and it looks very different from its appearance in The Phantom Menace. I guess it's grown and thrived under the Hutts for the past 40 years or so, or maybe the Mos Espa spaceport was just like a suburb or something. Anyway, this new and improved version of Mos Espa resembles concept art for the city that was created for The Phantom Menace by Doug Chiang, who is currently working on the Book of Boba Fett. Boba and Finnick travel to a Mos Espa cantina called the Sanctuary that holds several fun surprises inside. Most importantly, we have Max freaking Rebo, king of the keyboard. It would appear he survived the explosion of Jabba's sail barge along with Bib Fortuna, and I'm telling you, I have never been more relieved. He's playing alongside a Bith, and it's impossible to say for sure, but I'm gonna guess that's Figrin Dan, frontman for the Cantina Band in A New Hope. The reason I'm saying that is because he and Max are playing what the subtitles list as Cantina Theme Variation. So I'm thinking the two greatest musicians on Tatooine have finally collaborated, covering the old Modal Nodes classic, but with a Max Rebo twist. Boba and Finnick are offered a drink by an astromech droid, much in the same way R2-D2 could be seen serving drinks on Jabba's sail barge in Return of the Jedi. We can also see an RX series droid dealing cards. They were normally pilot droids, first introduced in Star Tours, but we've seen that they can branch out. RX-24 has seemingly retired from piloting to become a DJ at Oga's Cantina on Batuu, for example. Boba introduces Finnick as a master assassin to Garsa Fwip. That could just be a nice title he's throwing around, or it might mean she's part of the Assassin's Guild, which also held members like Ochi of Bestoon from The Rise of Skywalker. Garsa pays Boba in New Republic credits, which suggests Tatooine now accepts that currency. Watto insisted Republic credits were no good there in The Phantom Menace, but again, it seems like a lot has changed on Mos Espa over the course of 40 years. Back outside, a couple familiar aliens can be seen. One of them is Kyuzo, like the bounty hunter Embo, and the notorious Constable Zuvio, who was largely cut from The Force Awakens. The other is a Melbu, which is a species designed after a drawing by the 7-year-old daughter of creature designer Jake Lunt Davies, which first appeared as one of the Cloud Riders in Solo, a Star Wars story. In Chapter 2, The Tribes of Tatooine, the captured assassin of the Order of the Night Wind is ordered to speak. He simply responds, Ichuta. We don't know exactly what that means, but we do know it's very rude, thanks to C-3PO's response when a droid said that to him on Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back. The assassin is dropped into the Rancor pit, and Boba and Finnick roll their throne up to watch the show, just like in Return of the Jedi. Fortunately for the assassin, the Rancor pit is empty for now after Luke killed its previous inhabitant. All that remains is what appears to be a completely normal-looking rat, which feels a little out of place, but rats could be seen in Jabba's dungeons. The mayor, Mok Shaiz, is an Ithorian. Those aliens were first seen in the cantina in A New Hope. He wears a device over his two mouths, which automatically translates his Ithori's language to Basic. Those were first introduced in the Clone Wars. And he is voiced by Robert Rodriguez, who produced the series and directed some of the episodes. The mayor tells Boba Fett that running a crime family is more complicated than bounty hunting. I believe that to be a deliberate parallel to the client in Season 1 of The Mandalorian telling Din Djarin that bounty hunting is a complicated profession. Basically, the mayor is signaling to Boba and the audience that he is in over his head. At the Sanctuary, Fett notes that Garsa is nervous by saying she's sweating like a Gumpta on Mustafar. I don't know what a Gumpta is, but Mustafar is a lava planet, so literally anyone would be sweaty there. The two Hutts introduced, for now known as the Twins, are said to be cousins of the late Jabba the Hutt. The only other cousin of Jabba's I know of was named Kraka the Hutt, and according to the 4th issue of the Return to Vader's Castle comics, Jabba had Kraka's brain taken out and stored with the brains of the Bomar monks. One of the cousins uses what might be a tiny Hoojib to wipe sweat off his brow. Hoojibs were rabbit-like creatures that first appeared in the old 1977 Marvel comics. Their ears were bigger in the comics, but they did still have that single antenna on their heads. The large, black-haired Wookiee is named Black Chrysanthemum. He was first introduced in the Darth Vader comics in 2015, working for Jabba the Hutt. He was loaned to the service of Darth Vader along with Boba Fett, so the two bounty hunters most definitely knew each other. The attention to detail in his armor is fantastic. You can see that he sports a scar over his left eye, which was given to him by Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars comics. Boba refers to Chrysanthemum as a gladiator, which is part of his history in the comics. In fact, he volunteered to join the gladiatorial pits to learn to become a better killer. Boba Fett tells the twins to go back to Nal Hutta. That planet is the homeworld of the Hutts and first appeared in the Legends comic Dark Empire. It was made canon in the Clone Wars episode The Hunt for Zero, where it was revealed to be covered in swamps. In the flashbacks, the Tusken Raiders hunt for warts, Tatooine creatures that first appeared in Return of the Jedi outside of Jabba's palace. I might be off base here, but from a distance, the Pike Syndicate's train sounds an awful lot like a crate dragon to me. I think that could be connecting this technological beast with the natural enemy of the Tusken Raiders. In his quest to stop the train, Boba ventures to Tashi Station, a location first mentioned in A New Hope where Luke wanted to pick up some power converters. In a deleted scene from the movie, he actually does go to Tashi Station, where he has a conversation with mustached space hunk Biggs Darklighter, but his two friends, Fixer and Cammy, are also there. It would appear that they never left home and are still regulars at Tashi Station. The back of the Swoop Gang's jackets simply reads Tatooine in Arabesh. We later learn that they are known as the Kintan Striders, named after one of the creatures seen on the Dedrick or holochess board in A New Hope. The logo they spray onto places they have attacked is the Huttese letter K. Boba Fett leads the Tuskens in an assault against the Pike Syndicate's train, but this is not the first train job Boba Fett has ever taken part in. In the Clone Wars episode Bounty, he teamed up with Asajj Ventress, Bossk, Dengar, and more to protect a train from attackers. The user interface on the train reminds me a bit of Anakin's pod racer display in The Phantom Menace. The Arabesh reads lock in the top left and boost in the top right, kind of like in the Episode 1 racer game. As long as your pod is in good enough shape, you can boost. The Pike Syndicate themselves first appeared in the Clone Wars episode Eminence. They controlled much of the spice trade in the galaxy thanks to their planet's close proximity to Kessel. A Pike first appeared in live action in Solo, a Star Wars story, when Han and company traveled there to steal coaxium. This is the first time we're seeing their faces in live action, which kind of match their appearance in the Clone Wars. They're much closer to some of the concept art developed for Solo. We see that the Pikes still play a role in the spice trade in this episode. Boba Fett calls it Sansana Spice, which is its more official name. Sansana Spice shares a lot in common with the spice melange from Dune. Even its appearance in this episode is similar from what little we can see. The original Star Wars took quite a bit of inspiration from Dune, most prominently the desert planet Tatooine being similar to Arrakis, and the Tusken Raiders being similar to the Fremen. This episode also shares some common threads with Dune, such as the outsider adopting the ways of the inhabitants of the desert and leading them to victory in battle. The Tuskens loot a couple Camptonos from the train. Those storage devices were first named in The Mandalorian, but were first seen in The Empire Strikes Back as carried by Willrow Hood during the evacuation of Cloud City. The Pike leader is voiced by Stephen Stanton, a regular voice actor in Star Wars who also played Admiral Raddus in Rogue One, Grand Moff Tarkin in the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars Rebels, and many other characters. We've seen the Tusken Raiders drinking from Black Melon since the second season premiere of The Mandalorian, but this is the first time we've heard them called by name. They first appeared and were named in the 7th issue of the 2015 run of Star Wars comics when Obi-Wan attempted to sell them in a Tatooine market. The Tusken chief mentions that Tatooine was once covered in oceans that dried up. That idea originated in Star Wars Legends material, and the devastation of Tatooine was the result of an attack by the Rakatan Infinite Empire. By the end of the episode, Boba has made his own gaffy stick and is accepted fully into the Tusken tribe. The creation of his gaffy stick reminds me a lot of the way a Jedi constructs their first lightsaber. Younglings are taken to Ilum, where they face a trial, but in overcoming the trial, they will find the kyber crystal that will power their lightsabers, which they construct shortly after under the guidance of the droid Huyang. Boba wanders into the desert, where he has an intense vision of his past that he battles and overcomes. He returns with a branch, which he then constructs under the guidance of an expert. The location where he builds his gaffy stick is straight out of some concept art for A New Hope painted by Ralph McQuarrie. As he is accepted into the tribe, Boba is dressed by the Tusken Raiders in much the same way he was dressed by the droids in the first episode. The final ritual around the campfire is also reminiscent of concept art by Ralph McQuarrie. In the opening shot of Chapter 3, The Streets of Mos Espa, we see a Bomar monk walk by Jabba's palace. Those droids carried the living brains of members of the Bomar Order who believed that isolating themselves from physical sensations would help expand their minds. They were first seen in Return of the Jedi as R2-D2 and C-3PO entered Jabba's palace. Boba Fett hiring the speeder gang and taking them under his wing harkens back to the way Aurra Sing took him under her wing when he was young and lost. The gang resembles the mod subculture of London, which began in the 1950s. The British mods were known for having motor scooters similar to the speeders used by the gang. The fact that they make droid modifications to themselves might be a play on words as well. We can see the Tatooine food chain playing out in real time with a flying creature attacking a scurrier, and then both of them are eaten by a wart. That's just nature, but it's hard not to think of Qui-Gon Jinn's line in The Phantom Menace that there's always a bigger fish. In the flashback, we see Boba Fett travel to Mos Eisley to collect the Pike Syndicate's tribute to the Tusken Raiders. There, he witnesses stormtrooper helmets being placed on spikes, a grisly warning that is also seen later in the timeline by Din Djarin in the 5th chapter of The Mandalorian. You can also catch Peli and her pit droids walking by in the background, foreshadowing their appearance later in this series. The Pike boss is voiced by Phil LaMarr, who has played several other Star Wars characters, most notably Kit Fisto in The Clone Wars, as well as Bail Organa and Orn Free Taa. The blue and gold of his robes are also at least somewhat similar to another Pike leader, Marg Krim from The Clone Wars. He mentions his superior on Obadiah, that's the homeworld of the Pike people, located just outside the Kessel Run, which is how they have come to control so much of the spice trade in the galaxy. The title of the song that plays over the Tusken funeral is written in Mandoa, the language of Mandalorians. The phrase is also chanted as part of the music, and it translates to "family is more than blood." The phrase comes from Karen Travis, who wrote several legend stories about Mandalorians and provided resources about their language on her website. Black Chrysanthemum's electric brass knuckles are cool on their own, but they could also be a reference to the comics he appears in. He was given cybernetic augmentations, and his hands are already covered in metal, so he basically always has brass knuckles. The feast prepared for Boba Fett includes a roast nuna. That's a dish that pops up a lot in the Clone Wars animated series, but it's a nice touch to have it appear in live action. I also think I see some polystarch like Rey makes from her rations in The Force Awakens. The Hutts decide to leave Tatooine because they don't want a war between the syndicates, claiming it's bad for business. That reminded me of Dryden Voss also not wanting to mess with the fragile alliance Crimson Dawn held with the Pike Syndicate in Solo, a Star Wars story. The twins offer Boba Fett a Rancor by way of apology. Of course, that creature first appeared in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. The new Rancor's keeper is played by Danny Trejo, a frequent collaborator of Robert Rodriguez, who directed this episode. The Keeper explains that Rancors were once mounts for the Witches of Dathomir. That was absolutely true in Star Wars Legends, first seen in the book The Courtship of Princess Leia. Boba mentions riding beasts 10 times the Rancor's size. That could somehow be a reference to the mythosaurs of Mandalore, but they're supposed to be extinct. Or maybe he's talking about the dinosaur-looking thing he rode in the holiday special. He asks the Keeper to feed the Rancor a full Ronto carcass, which is big. Those beasts of burden were first seen in the special edition of A New Hope in 1997. The droid that's nearly hit by the passing speeders has similar markings to TC-70, Jabba's protocol droid from the Clone Wars. One of the speeder bikes crashes through a painting of Jabba the Hutt in his palace. It's a recreation of some concept art created by Ralph McQuarrie, although Luke Skywalker has been taken out. The Major Domo's speeder nearly hits a droid-piloted rickshaw, a mode of transportation first seen in Attack of the Clones. The chase ends when the Major Domo's speeder crashes into a cart full of Malarun fruit. That food first appeared in the Star Wars Rebels episode Fight or Flight, when Ezra and Zeb were sent into Lothal City to pick some up for Hera. One of the mods reports to Boba and Fennec from what appears to be the Star Wars version of a public telephone. That reminded me of a similar device from the Star Wars Holiday Special used by Boba Fett to contact Darth Vader, but it more closely matches a device seen in the Clone Wars episode To Catch a Jedi. In Chapter 4, The Gathering Storm, Boba Fett's view of Jabba's palace and the entrance to its hangar is a recreation of its depiction in the Battlefront games. Later on at night, Boba witnesses the events of Chapter 5 of The Mandalorian, The Gunslinger. The flares in the sky were part of Din and Toro's strategy to capture Fennec Shand. And of course, Boba approaching Finnick in the desert is a recreation of the final scene of that episode. The modifier in the parlor that fixes Finnick has an arm that resembles what you'd normally see on a B-2 battle droid. Fett calls the Slave 1 his fire spray gunship. I believe that's the first time the class of ship has been called by name on screen. Its full designation is Fire Spray 31 Class Patrol and Attack Craft. Finnick's little probe droid is kind of like Darth Maul's DRK-1 model droids from The Phantom Menace, but it's been nearly 40 years, so it's nice to see that probe droid technology has gotten smaller. It's also similar to a probe droid used by the bounty hunter Embo in the Clone Wars episode An Old Friend. When Finnick questions Boba's choice to send away his bantha before getting his ship back, he replies, "Either I get it or I die," which I see as a very grim way of saying, do or do not, there is no try. In Jabba's kitchen, we see the frog-like creatures from Chapter 4 of The Mandalorian that Grogu attempts to eat. An EV series supervisor droid is seen boiling the frogs. It's simply called a sous chef droid in the subtitles, so I don't believe it's meant to be EV-99 from Return of the Jedi. The chef droid is a COO series cook droid that was first seen in Attack of the Clones serving a pancake-like food on the transport that Anakin and Padme took from Coruscant to Naboo. The Ratcatcher droid is an LEP series service droid first seen in the Clone Wars movie and series. This is its first live-action appearance. The hangar, like the exterior of Jabba's palace, matches that same battlefront map as well as cross-sections of the palace from the Complete Locations reference book. There is a plunk droid in the hangar, which is basically a longer gonk droid. And we learned that they explode when you shoot them, so that fits very well with all the video game references going on in this episode. Boba knocks over a sand skiff in the hangar as he tries to pilot the Slave 1. It's likely just a spare sitting around the palace, but in Legends, Bib Fortuna survived the explosion of the sail barge by hopping in an emergency skiff and flying away from the battle. Maybe this is that skiff. Finnick says there are good mechanics in Mos Eisley. She could be referring to Peli, who fixed the Razor Crest in The Mandalorian multiple times, but she'll never fix it again, R.I.P. We get a better look at the inside of the Sarlacc pit, and we learn that the beak isn't always exposed. That feels kind of like a compromise between its original appearance in Return of the Jedi and how it was altered for the special editions in 1997. Finnick drops the Slave One's most awesome weapon into the Sarlacc, the Seismic Charge, which has a cool-sounding detonation even underground. Then Boba Fett actually does enter the Sarlacc after it's dead, and I'm choosing to accept that as a reference to the time in the old Legends Marvel comics where Boba Fett escaped the Sarlacc and then fell back in on a runaway sandcrawler. Boba offers Finnick a scurrier to eat at the campfire. They first appeared in the special edition of A New Hope and also popped up in Chapter 9 of The Mandalorian, The Marshal. In the present day, when Boba asks Finnick if the mayor's majordomo is cooperating, she says he's singing like a yezum. That species first appeared in the background of Return of the Jedi, but quite literally got the spotlight when Joe Yowza was added to the special edition as one of the singers of the Max Rebo Band. Boba Fett says the line, "Power hates a vacuum." That line was also said by Cobb Vanth when talking about the fall of the Empire in Chapter 9 of The Mandalorian. In the Sanctuary, we see Black Chrysanthemum get drunk and rough up some seemingly innocent Trandoshans. Wookiees and Trandoshans have a long-standing grudge because Trandoshans often capture and hunt Wookiees for sport or sell them into slavery, a fact that was referenced back in Chapter 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. Garsa Fwip recalls Chrysanthemum's legendary reputation as a gladiator, which was his backstory in the comics before he became a bounty hunter. She makes special mention of his knuckle dusters, which were also part of his backstory. She's more likely referring to the electric weapons he wears, but the bones in his hands also have metal plating, which were referred to as permanent knuckle dusters in the comics. Unfortunately for the Trandoshan, Garsa doesn't change Chrysanthemum's mind, and an arm still gets torn off, which Wookiees are well known to do. But hey, Trandoshans can regrow their limbs, so it's not that big a deal. After the gruesome display, the bar patrons go right back to their music and fun, just like after Ponda Baba's dismemberment in the cantina in A New Hope. The music during the dinner scene of the three crime families sounds very much inspired by the score for The Godfather and other mobster movies. Speaking of music, when Finnick tells Boba they can use credits to buy extra muscle, the theme for The Mandalorian begins to play, which isn't an Easter egg, it's very obvious, but damn was it cool and it gave me goosebumps. In Chapter 5, Return of the Mandalorian, the title of the episode itself is a reference to a little film called Return of the Jedi. And if you've got a keen eye, you'll see Din Djarin, the main character of a series called The Mandalorian, who makes an appearance early on in the episode, and then he just sticks around for the rest of the series. The opening scenes take place in a butcher shop. One of the developers of the cancelled Star Wars game 1313 revealed plans for a butcher shop to be used as a location in that story, and some leaked gameplay shows exactly that. Also, the concept art for the episode suggests that the carcasses of meat were once nerfs, which were first mentioned in The Empire Strikes Back when Leia calls Han a scruffy-looking nerf herder. Although it doesn't look like it's a full ring, it's hard not to see the similarities between the space station Din visits and the Halo from, well, Halo. But Star Wars has also had similar ring stations since the 80s, like the Wheel. He delivers the head of his bounty to an Ishi-Tib, a species that first appeared in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. The hidden symbols guiding Din to his covert are shaped like a Mandalorian visor, and the final symbol is shaped like a mix between a visor and a mythosaur, a common symbol for the Mandalorian people. It's not called by name, but I assume Paz Vizsla heals Din's leg with Bacta spray. The Armorer explains that the Darksaber was forged over 1,000 years ago by the Mandalorian Jedi Tar Vizsla. That history was first established in the Star Wars Rebels episode Trials of the Darksaber. The Armorer also speaks of prophecies claiming the Mythosaur will rise up to herald a new age of Mandalore, but sadly it only exists in legends. That's a cheeky nod to the massive creatures that once roamed the planet Mandalore in the Star Wars Legends continuity until they were driven to extinction by Mandalorians, but I am also hopeful that this is some foreshadowing that we might actually see one later on in The Mandalorian. The Armorer claims Beskar is meant only for armor and not weapons. I've talked about how Mandalorian armor and gear and weapons are kind of a parallel to the Force before. Beskar is like the source of a Mandalorian's power, and just like the Force, it should be used for defense and never attack. Although they also say the Darksaber is made of Beskar, so that seems like bending the rules at least a little bit, but that can't pierce Beskar armor, so I guess Mandalorians are fine with it. The Armorer drops a lot of knowledge this episode. She also references Bo-Katan accepting the Darksaber as a gift. That can be seen in the Star Wars Rebels episode Heroes of Mandalore. But the surviving Mandalorians see her attempt to rule by blood alone as a curse that led to the Night of 1,000 Tears. They claim House Kryze lost their way, which is a reference to Duchess Satine Kryze and her push to make Mandalorians a pacifist people as seen throughout the Clone Wars series. The Armorer says she and others survived the Night of 1,000 Tears because they weren't on Mandalore but were instead on the moon Concordia. What she doesn't mention is that they were exiled there by Duchess Satine, and that backstory can be seen in the Clone Wars episode The Mandalore Plot. But that's basically confirmation that most surviving Mandalorians were probably members of Death Watch or other groups with similar violent views. We first heard of the Night of 1,000 Tears in Chapter 8 of The Mandalorian, but this is our first time actually witnessing the event. The large dome-like structure we see destroyed by TIE bombers is Sundari, the capital city of Mandalore, which can also be seen in the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. The desolation of the planet and the image of fallen Mandalorian helmets is very reminiscent of some of the promotional art used for Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. And I feel like the KX security droid stomping around the battlefield has to be a reference to the Terminator series. Bryce Dallas Howard directed this episode and appeared in Terminator Salvation, so it could be a fun and purposeful nod to that universe. The gift that the Armorer forges for Grogu being wrapped to look like the child's head is a nice touch, just a reminder to Din of what he has currently let go of. As the Armorer spars with Din and the Darksaber, she counts in Mandoa, the language of the Mandalorian people. Din says that the blade gets heavier with every swing, and there's some excellent thematic reasoning behind that, but it's also consistent with what Sabine learns about lightsabers in Star Wars Rebels. Kanan tells her she's not fighting with a blade so much as she is directing a current of power. Her thoughts and actions become energy that flow through the crystal and become part of the blade. Din's inability to effectively wield the Darksaber is a manifestation of the fact that he doesn't want the responsibility that comes with it. Not yet, anyway. Paz Vizsla battles Din for the right to wield the Darksaber, and it's obvious from his last name, but yes, he is the descendant of Tar Vizsla, the creator of the Darksaber, and Pre Vizsla, who wielded it for much of the Clone Wars. Pre and Paz Vizsla are both voiced by Jon Favreau. During their duel, Paz uses a Mandalorian energy shield that was first seen in the Clone Wars and again in Star Wars Rebels. Later, we see another RX series pilot droid, like from Garsa Fwip's Sanctuary, but this time it's working where we first saw that droid model, in public transportation. When Din boards the ship, someone else walks by wearing what appears to be a range trooper coat from Solo: A Star Wars Story. As the public transport lands on Tatooine, gates can be seen in the distance. They're similar to the one seen at Nema Outpost on Jakku, but they were originally designed by Ralph McQuarrie for Jabba's palace. At Peli's garage, we see that she's got a new droid, and it's a BD model. I cannot describe to you how happy and excited that made me. That model was first seen in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order as the companion droid of Cal Kestis. They've popped up in comics as well, but this is the first time we've seen one in live action. Of course, Peli still has R5-D4 from A New Hope and the pit droids from The Phantom Menace. The poor BD droid is attacked by a womp rat, and we can see one later on in the episode as well, but those were the creatures Luke says he used to shoot as target practice in his T-16 Skyhopper. I used to think that was kinda messed up, but since one of them attacked my new best friend of the BD unit, I'll let Luke off the hook. I don't know if this was a purposeful reference, but the womp rat attacking Peli reminded me of the Velociraptor's first attack at the start of Jurassic Park. Again, that does make sense considering Bryce Dallas Howard is one of the stars of the Jurassic World films. When we see the injured BD unit after the attack, it's limping in the exact same way BD-1 limps in Fallen Order after being attacked by a bog rat. Peli offers Din an N1 starfighter as a replacement for the Razor Crest he lost in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Of course, they were prominent in The Phantom Menace, and Peli mentions their affiliation with Naboo. She says she can make the N1 faster than a fathier, the creatures seen racing around Canto Bight in The Last Jedi. She also says the ship can jump into hyperspace without a docking ring, which is technology we first saw in Attack of the Clones. Peli says that she dated a Jawa once and that they were furry. In the first draft for Star Wars written in 1974, Jawa was the name of the species that would eventually become Wookiees. For the actual production of Star Wars, costume designer John Mallow said that the Jawas were originally meant to be like little rats, but George felt that was too theatrical, so they pulled them back to simple black masks with light-up eyes. We actually get to see a Gonk droid charge something, and I think that's the first time that's been shown in live action. The BD droid's ability to scan and display objects in a practical way is taken straight from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. The Jawas deliver a cryogenic density combustion booster to Din, so now we finally have a name for the pipe that Han and Leia attempted to use to stop the trash compactor from closing in on them in A New Hope. Peli mentions that she removed the astromech port from the N1 because of Din's attitude towards droids, which was made clear in the first episode of The Mandalorian. But that little bubble has got to hold Grogu at some point, right? During Din's test drive of his new ship, he flies through some familiar locations from the Boonta Eve pod race in The Phantom Menace. That includes Beggar's Canyon, which was also mentioned by Luke in A New Hope, and we see the ramp Sebulba forced Anakin onto during their race. And the debris is still there. Nobody cleaned that up in 40 years? Din says the ship tracks as tight as a rail speeder. He basically means it handles so well it might as well be on tracks, but rail speeders were first seen in Rogue One outside the Citadel Tower on Scarif. His flight over the commercial transport feels a lot like Anakin flying over the Trade Federation droid control ship in The Phantom Menace. Din even tries spinning, which is a good trick. He's then pulled over by the New Republic, and one of the officers is Carson Teva. He first appeared in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and he's played by Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who is a massive Star Wars fan and has his own YouTube channel about his various fandoms you should check out. The other pilot, Lieutenant Reed, is played by Max Lloyd-Jones, who also played Luke Skywalker's body double in the Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. Adding to all the prequel and pod racing callbacks, when Din returns to Peli, he says his flight was wizard. I love that he uses a term for cool that was probably more common when he was a kid during the Clone Wars. Peli says J-type pulse engines really tighten the old evacuation port, don't they? Evacuation port is my new favorite Star Wars term for butt, but J-type engines were used in several Naboo ships like the J-type 327 Nubian Royal Starship seen in The Phantom Menace. In Chapter 6, From the Desert Comes a Stranger, Cobb Vanth gets to kick off the episode, laying down the law against the Pike Syndicate as they spread into Mos Pelgo territory. He's looking just as good as when we last saw him in The Mandalorian's second season premiere. His insistence that he's the one that tells folks what to do is a repeated line from that same episode, and his theme song repeats. Look, I know Cobb Vanth is hardly an Easter egg, but if you thought I wasn't going to take a chance to talk about how cool he is, you must be new here. The spice he dumps out into the sand looks very similar to the spice from Dune. I think they figured they were past the subtlety, so why not go all in? That Luke Skywalker fellow has been in a lot of Star Wars, so you probably recognize him. Seriously though, he is looking great in this episode, a vast improvement over Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Luke's Jedi hut resembles the huts on Ahch-To, where Luke eventually goes into exile. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or if Luke has already visited the first Jedi Temple at this point. StarWars.com has confirmed that this is meant to be the first building in Luke's Jedi Temple that appears in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. It's possible this planet is Agen Kloss. Some of the terrain looks similar, and we know Luke used it to train Leia for a brief time, so maybe this is him returning. Luke helps Grogu remember his last moments at the Jedi Temple, and we see a memory of Order 66. The 3 Jedi can't be identified, but one of them does look a lot like Sin Dralig, the Battlemaster and Chief of Security at the Coruscant Temple. I don't think that's the case, because we can see him dueling Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, and I doubt he would have survived that encounter to run off and protect Grogu, but you never know. It wouldn't be the only retcon this episode introduces. The clone troopers attacking the Jedi are members of the 501st Legion, which is the same legion that attacked the temple in Revenge of the Sith. Some people have been saying they see Oppo, their clone commander, among their ranks, but I think his telltale arrow on his helmet is unfortunately just a trick of the light. But there is a Clone Wars connection to this scene. It might mean something, it might not, but you can see a symbol on the doors on both sides of the hallway. The only other time we've seen that symbol was in the Clone Wars Season 5 episode, The Wrong Jedi. That symbol is on the door of fallen Jedi Padawan Barriss Offee. Wikipedia lists that symbol as Barriss Offee's crest, and it does make sense, the diamonds are reminiscent of her face tattoos, but I find it odd that in this new episode and in the Clone Wars, the symbol is on multiple doors, not just her own quarters. The concept art for the Clone Wars doesn't specify it as Barriss's crest, just as a symbol added to the door, so it might be Barriss's, or it might just be like a symbol for the Jedi living quarters area. At the very least, we're seeing where Grogu's vision took place. Or, to slap on a tinfoil hat, maybe Barriss had a hand in saving Grogu. I think that's unlikely, since she would have been locked up somewhere at that point, but you never know. Her introduction here could open possibilities for her appearance in the Ahsoka series, because their stories were closely connected. Speaking of, Ahsoka's appearance in this episode was a pleasant surprise, and of course her line saying she's an old friend of the family's is a reference to her time serving as Anakin's apprentice during the Clone Wars. She also says there's nowhere in the galaxy safer than with Luke, which is true for now, but give it a few years, Ahsoka. Grogu gets to ride around with Luke in a little blue backpack just like Yoda did. I think it's supposed to be the exact same backpack. And Luke's run through the jungle is of course very similar to the training he used to do with Yoda. Luke uses a training remote to help teach Grogu to jump. Luke used the same model in A New Hope, and Jedi younglings used them for training in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant as well. Grogu's jumps are very similar to Yoda's acrobatics in Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and the Clone Wars series. When Luke asks Ahsoka what he should do about Grogu, she tells him to trust his instincts. That's generally a big Jedi lesson, but it's one that was brought up a lot in the Clone Wars, especially in stories surrounding Ahsoka. On Din's way to Mos Pelgo, he flies by a sandcrawler with a massive krayt dragon skull mounted on the top. I assume that's meant to be the remains of the krayt dragon he helped kill in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. And we can see that the cantina in Mos Pelgo has what looks like the rib cage of the beast up as decoration. Or maybe those are load-bearing krayt dragon bones, I'm not sure. Oh, and it's not Mos Pelgo anymore. The Weequay says they changed their name to Freetown. That's what they called it in the Aftermath trilogy of books by Chuck Wendig in the same chapters that introduced us all to Cobb Vanth. The bartender's claim that Mos Espa problems are not Freetown's concern is very reminiscent of Luke's own thoughts about the Empire in A New Hope, especially in the deleted scenes with Biggs at Tashi Station. Luke says the Empire doesn't care about Tatooine, but Biggs says they will eventually, and of course he's right. Injustice against anyone should not be tolerated. It doesn't matter how close or far from you it's taking place. The whole situation also mirrors the Gungans' initial refusal to join the fight against the Trade Federation in The Phantom Menace. And now we get to the big guy, Cad Bane. He was introduced as one of the best bounty hunters alive during the Clone Wars. This is his very first live-action appearance, but he also recently appeared in The Bad Batch. He is a Duros, which is a species that was introduced in A New Hope all the way back in 1977. The character is still voiced by Corey Burton, who portrayed the character in The Clone Wars and The Bad Batch. He was physically played by Dorian Kingi, which is a new name to me, but I wanted to make sure they got the credit they deserved as well. And while I'm at it, Luke Skywalker was physically portrayed by Graham Hamilton in this episode. In much the same way that Boba Fett was inspired by the man with no name from classic Western films, Bane was inspired by the character Angel Eyes from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The tense three-way standoff is also very similar to the final scenes of that same film, except this time the bad character wins the duel. Bane still wields the same LL-30 blaster pistols that he used in his animated appearances. He says that as long as the spice keeps running, everyone will be left alone. It's almost like he's saying, the spice must flow. As the citizens of Freetown rush to Cobb Vanth's aid, you can hear them calling for medpacks and stims. Medpacks have been a part of Star Wars since 1977 and the 18th issue of the classic Marvel Comics. Stims are the healing device used in several video games, including Knights of the Old Republic and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, so that's 2 weeks in a row we got a Fallen Order reference. In Garsa Fwip's sanctuary, we can see that her protocol droid has a restraining bolt. Those devices were installed onto R2-D2 and C-3PO by the Jawas in A New Hope to make sure the droids were firmly under their control. The Pike Syndicate blows the building to pieces, and I just want to point out that I don't think Max Rebo was playing that night. He doesn't seem to be with the band, maybe he got another gig, but even if he were inside, I would hold out hope. If he can survive the destruction of Jabba's sail barge, he can survive the destruction of the Sanctuary, he's gonna live forever. But if that was Vigran Dan or another member of the modal nodes like I guessed earlier, rest in peace? The Pikes leaving a bomb hidden inside a Camtano is a reference to the Untouchables when some mobsters hid a bomb inside a briefcase. Back at Luke's little hut, which is now complete, he offers Grogu the gift Din made for him, a Beskar chainmail shirt. It's hard not to draw the parallels between that and the mithril mail Bilbo Baggins wears in The Hobbit that he then passes on to Frodo Baggins in The Lord of the Rings. But Luke also offers Grogu Yoda's lightsaber, which is a bit of a retcon. In Charles Soule's run of the Darth Vader comics, Masamita can be seen destroying Yoda's lightsaber, which he had lost during his duel with Darth Sidious. So there are a couple of ways we can rationalize that. My best guess is that Yoda had more than one lightsaber during his 900-year life. In Chapter 7, In the Name of Honor, Fennec Shand points out that the spice trade made up most of Jabba the Hutt's business. In A New Hope, Jabba was so upset with Han because he dumped a shipment of spice into space to avoid being arrested by the Empire. Cad Bane makes a comment about Ithorians having 2 stomachs. I believe that's new information, but that species already has 2 mouths and 4 throats, so why not 2 stomachs as well? R2-D2 pilots Grogu back to Tatooine in Luke's X-Wing. We've seen several astromechs piloting starfighters on their own over the years, but R2-D2 has done it himself in a Boba Fett story before. In the Clone Wars episode R2 Come Home, he piloted a Jedi starfighter on his own to escape Boba Fett and Aurra Sing. Peli feeds Grogu some dung worms, which do not sound appetizing at all, but they first appeared in the Phantom Menace video game on Tatooine. They were snacks in the game, but they were known to have a specific stench to them, hence the name, I guess, but Grogu doesn't seem to mind at all. Cad Bane utters the phrase, "If that's not the Quokta calling the Stifling slimy." Boba Fett used that exact same phrase when talking to Bo-Katan and Koska Reeves in Chapter 16 of The Mandalorian. I like the idea that it was something Cad Bane said a lot while mentoring Boba, and then he just picked it up himself. The Twi'lek Majordomo says the Pikes are working out of the Desert Survey Office in Mos Eisley. That was a location that was first mentioned in 2001 in a role-playing adventure called Secrets of Mos Eisley. A Pike soldier calls the Majordomo a tailhead, which was a derogatory term for Twi'leks from the Star Wars Legends days. The Majordomo then says he hopes to see the fabled obsidian cliffs of Obadiah one day. The Clone Wars series has shown us the black mountainous cliffs of the Pike homeworld, and the book Dark Disciple describes the terrain of the planet as obsidian mountain crags. The Pike Syndicate sends a pair of Scorpinek droids after Boba and his gang. That model first appeared in the 2006 reference book, The New Essential Guide to Droids. It was based on unused concept art from Attack of the Clones. Their similarities to droidicas are purposeful, even in the sound design of their blasters. Din's inability to break through the Scorpinek droid shields by brute force is taken from the Clone Wars episode A War on Two Fronts, where Anakin and Ahsoka teach the guerrilla forces of the planet Onderon to slowly roll weapons called droid poppers through a droidica's deflector shields. Drash says she grew up a womp hop from where she and the other soldiers take cover. I guess that's the Tatooine way of saying a stone's throw, named after the womp rats of the planet. The Weequay finally gets a name, and it's Tanti. I'm glad we don't have to just keep calling him Weequay. The The Rancor gouging out the eye of one of the Scorpion X reminds me of Obi-Wan telling R2-D2 to disable a buzz droid by zapping its center eye. I don't know why everyone doesn't just assume you're supposed to attack the big red glowing thing. Hasn't anyone in Star Wars ever played a video game with a boss fight? One of the poor pikes that gets caught up by the Rancor lets out a Wilhelm scream as he is thrown across the city. That sound effect has become a staple of Star Wars starting all the way back in the original movie. It's being used less and less these days, but it still makes me laugh. Cad Bane mentions that he's known Boba Fett for a long time, and Boba says he's not a little boy any longer, and Bane offers him one final lesson during their duel. All of that comes from an unfinished arc of the Clone Wars where Cad Bane mentored a teenaged Boba Fett to become as good of a bounty hunter as his father. When the time was right, Bane challenged Boba to a duel to prove he was a better hunter than the Fetts. The duel ended in a draw which resulted in the signature dent in Boba's helmet. Bane was also apparently shot in the head, which is why he wears a metal plate, which can now be seen in live action. There is a question about whether or not Cad Bane is truly dead after this fight. There's a blinking red light on his chest that definitely seems purposeful. I listened to the audio description to see if there were any clues, and it says that Boba watches the life drain from Bane and then specifically points out the blinking red light. I kinda think it can go either way at this point. I'm assuming he's dead for now, but the light leaves the door open for the writers to have something to connect back to as a setup for his survival. I think his death is really impactful for the series and Boba's journey, and I like the way Bane's story could possibly end here, but come on, this is Star Wars. He already survived getting shot in the head. What's a little stab wound? The Rancor's rampage through Mos Espa seems like an obvious homage to King Kong as it climbs the tallest tower in the city. Peli saying there won't be a barbecue after Grogu puts the Rancor to sleep is a reference to her habit of cooking whatever meat she comes by. She cooked the Krayt Dragon steak in Chapter 10 of The Mandalorian and talked about cooking the Womp Rat meat in Chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett. We finally get to see Grogu in his tiny little bubble Peli installed into Din's new Starfighter ride, which isn't an Easter egg, but it's too cute not to mention. And that's everything I caught. I'm sure there's more to be found, so let me know what I missed down in the comments. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to see all our Book of Boba Fett coverage, and consider checking out our Patreon page for even more. We released video reactions and audio commentaries for every episode as they came out. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.